Hey everyone, it's Puzzle, and here's another collection of Easter eggs and details from the new Silent Hill 2 remake. Have you noticed that Silent Hill knows James' profession? As we know from official sources that came out during the original game, James used to be an office worker. This isn't often mentioned in the game, but in the remake, Silent Hill hints at this and tries to lure James by reminding him of his past, peaceful life without monsters and nightmares. The first time you can notice this is by looking at the posters on the poles, which offer office space for rent. And later in the game, when you're in the labyrinth, Silent Hill even throws in a room with an office desk. Silent Hill is hinting to James that he could get an office there and stay in Silent Hill forever. The scene where James squeezes through the door made of limbs could be seen in the trailer for the original Silent Hill. It's a subtle moment, but again, it's cool that the developers recreated even such little details, especially with the new graphics. This passage looks insanely creepy. By the way, speaking of steady jobs in Silent Hill, have you noticed the post office in the game? It's a rather unnoticeable building. Also in the city, you can find a strange message written on the window which reads, "There was a hole here, it's gone now." A second message can be found later in the game. Art director Masahiro Ito recalls that the origin of the whole message came from either environment artist Takeshi Miura or scenario writer Hiroyuki Owaku. He speculated that the message could symbolize that James Sunderland no longer has anywhere to hide from himself. After killing his wife Mary, James had fallen into a state of denial and was drawn to the town, believing that she might still be alive in Silent Hill, waiting for him. When he arrives, his guilt is manifested into twisted monsters and scenarios, including ones like Pyramid Head, which tries to force him to remember his crime against his will. Many believe this is a reference to Silent Hill 4, where the protagonist encounters holes in the walls. Moreover, a very similar hole exists in Silent Hill 2 Remake, and the reason I made this connection is that it's located in a bathroom, just like in Silent Hill 4. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but this might not be a coincidence. Also, in yesterday's episode, we found a shirt that looks very much like the shirt worn by the protagonist of Silent Hill 4. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out. Since we're talking about James' past today, there's a small but cool detail in the game. James keeps his finger on the trigger, which is something people without military training typically do. You know, safety first. One careless move and you're lying there with another pile of Jameses in front of a boss fight with Eddie. Speaking of Eddie, yes, he definitely killed more than just one James, although they look a little different. This is probably due to the distortions in James' Otherworld, similar to Angela's nightmares, where her father and brother are abusers. I talked more about this in yesterday's video. In the original Silent Hill 2, there was a moment where two insane mannequins would jump out at James out of nowhere and just lie on the road. Their behavior was strange. But in the remake, you can find these guys again. However, in this version you won't see them jump. Walking down the dark street, you'll hear a sound like something fell on the road, and turning around, you'll spot two bodies. Yep, it's our old jump scare friends. As always, a small but important detail for fans. At one point, you'll come across a cemetery with graves for James, Eddie, Angela, Walter Sullivan, and a mysterious grave marked Miriam K. Traitor. We find her grave in the cemetery next to Walter Sullivan's grave. Does the name remind you of anyone? Of course, it's no coincidence. Miriam K. is a derivation of Miriam Locane, the name of Walter's 8th victim. She probably betrayed her brother somehow. Obviously, the gravestone is just a hallucination, which was only part of James' world, or was it? James could see other people's worlds too, so maybe he saw Walter's world. Walter, being bad with grammar, could have written Locane. This Easter egg has been puzzling people for decades, and if you have any ideas about it, it would be interesting to hear them in the comments. Have you noticed that if you lower James' health to 0, the old health icon from the original game appears in the interface? By the way, you can also find it on a pharmacy in town. You can see multiple damage marks on the wall after hearing the sound of Pyramid Head walking through the corridors. These sounds are the damage he's causing as he moves around with his not-so-convenient weapon. Also, the transition from reality to the other world in the game can be noticed by the flickering of the flashlight, especially in the labyrinth when you enter the other world. In the corridors where you'll meet Pyramid Head, you'll see familiar locations like the wardrobe James hid in, and there's a small surprise when you reach the ladder. turning for just a second to descend, you'll notice that Pyramid Head has been following you the whole time, then he just disappears. Also during the game, you may start hearing sudden gasps at key locations or places related to Mary. And yes, it's Mary's final breath, haunting James throughout Silent Hill and doesn't let him go. Have you noticed that all the clocks show the same time? It's 9:10. Even in the puzzle in the apartments, we set this time on the clocks. It definitely means something, and most likely it's the time of Mary's death. Like everything in Silent Hill, the town is hinting to our protagonist about his wife's death. There's also an interesting code on one of the safes in the game, specifically 0451. Fans of immersive sims such as Deus Ex, Dishonored, and System Shock will appreciate this, as this number combination is something of a nod to the genre. In all games of this genre, you can find a random safe, lock, or door, and this code will always open the lock. This code has become a kind of Easter egg among developers who pay tribute to the immersive sim genre. By the way, speaking of nods to Silent Hill 3, take a look at the police car parked in the foggy town. Specifically the logo of the local police, it contains familiar symbols from the halo of the sun, which appears in the third game. Interestingly, we also found this symbol in the hotel earlier, so it's becoming obvious that the developers really want to point us toward the third installment. Could this be because it's the next remake? What do you think? It's funny that during the encounter with Eddie, James will aim at him differently. His aim will shake, and he'll seem uncertain during the fight. This can be explained by the fact that Eddie is essentially the first human-like opponent in the game. Before this, we only fought grotesque monsters and creatures, but what's even cooler is that after the boss fight, James will repeat a scene from the beginning of the game where he looks at his hands. This time he seems to be accepting himself and what's happening around him. His hands won't shake anymore because he's already done it and is accepting himself for who he is. Specifically, his guilt, which he has been trying to avoid throughout the game. And that's it for today, I think. We've already covered so many little details that I'm getting tired of referring to my previous videos, so I recommend subscribing to the channel and checking out the content there. I'll keep making detailed reviews, and thanks for the support, everyone. This was Puzzle. See you in the next video.